and this call is to share So I'm going to start. I am Judy Mortrude from the Center for Law and Social Policy. And at the end of last summer, CLASP, our organization, put out an IET paper that really focused on the variety of program models under IET. So I'm dragging over a copy of it here, that are possible under the WIOA definition and regulation. The paper stresses IET at every skill level and in a variety of settings and with varied populations and partners. Generally, the idea here in our paper is that IET is not only IBEST, that IBEST is the gold standard, but not the only standard. And when we put this paper together, we focused on not only how to fund and report and promote IET models, but also on specific models themselves. We finalized the paper with input from Johan Uven and Chris Coro and Cheryl Keenan and Octay. We promoted it during the State Adult Ed Directors Meeting in the fall. And again, really the main purpose is to raise awareness of the IET definition, the variety of the models that are out there, and help state administrators, local administrators think about implementing these models on the ground. Okay, and I'm going to turn it over to Anson to talk about a survey that his staff has been fielding.
Hi there, I'm Anson Green. I'm with the Texas Workforce Commission. I'm very happy to be here today on the webinar. We are really thrilled about the evolution and the promotion of the integrated education and training model here in Texas, and I know many other states are very, very excited about these opportunities that are offered under the law. So some kind of background on what we're about to see. When we started implementing in Texas, it's a big state, many programs, and we were very excited about the opportunity. For us, we see IET as really the future of adult education, tying underskilled individuals to high-quality training and in-demand occupations to help really families and individuals earn more and really become strong taxpayers and strong assets to the business community. And so we wanted to make sure, knowing that the capacity building needs of the field were going to be pretty steep in the first year or so, probably 2 years. So we developed a kind of a combination of professional development, technical assistance, webinars, and things of that sort, and then a review portal survey for our programs to submit their program models to us so that we could kind of learn, at a minimum, are they meeting requirements for the models designs that we had promoted and that later came out in WIOA in many forms, so that we could kind of manage quality. But then it also gave us a good feedback mechanism to kind of figure out what exactly are folks doing and in what industries are they in and how much are they tied to their workforce system, etc. So the survey that you're going to see here was something first that we kind of used actually as a technical assistance tool in Texas. But then it became something that all of a sudden we kind of had the light bulb moment and said, why don't we go ahead and kind of tweak it and send it out to the other states so we can kind of find out what's going on nationally. And you can see here we have had 43 states respond with over 260 respondents. So we're starting to really gather, really as a service to the country, we're doing this to kind of help out, but really to help researchers and the Department of Education, other groups, kind of get a sense of where are the adult ed providers in the country in terms of deployment. So as we go in and look at some of the survey, if we go to the next slide, one of one of the elements we looked at is really what are the occupations that the integrated education and training program prepares students for in employment. And so here we're starting to see at a national level really what are the providers across the country doing. As expected, we see something like CNA, which is a good access point into a healthcare industry for lower skilled individuals, as being 51% of respondents responding there. But then, I was starting to really get excited because as we look down this list of occupations, we see really lots of driver industries, in-demand occupations being listed on what's going on in the state. So that really showed us at a really early implementation stage in terms of nationally that we are hitting in the right place in terms of going to provide high quality training for underskilled populations in industries where there's good career ladders and where there's good growth. Next slide, please. So another question we asked, kind of getting more sense of like the quality or the aspects of the IT. How is it aligned to support occupational needs in the local or state economy? And here another good glimpse at where are we hitting in terms of how are these programs, these technical training programs, aligned locally. And so we see really strong match, 56% matched to the defined driver industries as defined by the local Workforce Development Board, with the college, community college, and technical systems of the country coming in at 17%. So really a strong connection there to the workforce systems. But then also very interesting to see that 5% aren't aligned, or they don't know who aligned these to their local needs. And then there's a large percentage, 11%, that really didn't know if they were aligned to local needs. So that would tell me as a state director, like, wow, this is an area where we really need to promote and do some capacity building to make sure those connections to driver industries are being made. Next slide. Okay, this one was another really interesting slide for us to look at here, and this has to do with how long the programs are in terms of deployment and completion for students. And so, when we look at the research literature on these integrated models, a lot of stuff that's been promulgated by the Community College Research Center and others, really talking about that tipping point of how long does it take for to see real wage lift in terms of a training program for underskilled individuals with these integrated models. And here we see typically the research is saying, about a year's training and a certificate is really going to make some significant wage lift for individuals. And so this starts to give us a gauge here. We see about half of them, or not half, but a quarter of them, 24%, hitting at 6 to 12 months, and then 27%, the highest amount, 3 to 6 months. Now, at first, it kind of worried me because I'm like, man, that's not getting close. But then when I reflect back at the number one training program, recall that was Certified Nurse Assistant or Certified Nurse Aide in some states. That's a very short-term training, as many people know. So that makes kind of sense. That would kind of drive our training months down since we have so many programs doing CNA. But again, a good glimpse that we see only about 2% of them at 18 months or more. But I know here in Texas, really to get an entry-level credit certificate, you need about a year to 18 months. So I think our Texas numbers, in some of our community colleges would show higher numbers of months. But there is this tipping point of how long can students stay before they really need to go back into the workforce. So very good indicator here at a national level about what we're looking about in terms of program length. Next slide. Does the workforce training include the opportunity to earn a recognized post-secondary credential? So we're all well aware, I think, now that that recognized post-secondary credential is really the currency that business community is looking for, and in particular that industry recognized certificate or certification, that certification that's being awarded by some third-party industry group as really being the currency of job durability and transferability. Workforce Board eligible training provider system at 31%, and then surprisingly self-pay at 30%, so students paying out of pocket, and then other foundation grants and others coming in at 33%. So really a good mix there with nothing really dominating, but it really shows that if I was thinking of new program startup, it'd be really something in terms of talking to program directors at the local level and making sure, you know, if I was a state director, thinking about, do we really have guidance on helping our local programs access and understand these different ways, because there's not just one way to get this training paid for. But, you know, we're in an era now where, you know, we can really take off the table the excuse of, you know, we can't do this because we don't have the money or can't find the money. Or there's multiple avenues being reflected here that 43 states are accessing to help offset training costs for students and really get these programs up and running. So I think this is an area where guidance to local directors is really needed, because my experience in adult education is, you know, these other resources and ways of paying for training through the workforce system, ETPS, or the ability to benefit and whatnot, are areas that a lot of our program directors at the local level just aren't that apprised of. So a lot of growth for capacity building there, but absolutely instrumental. I mean, this is how you get the show on the road in terms of paying for the program. Next slide. Okay, next slide. If federal adult ed funds are being used for the workforce training, which in what manner are those local funds or those federal funds being used? And so the dynamic here, and I hear this from my fellow state directors, is you know, do we want to, you know, how much money of the federal funds do we want to allocate towards training, if any? Some state directors I know don't want to spend their precious adult ed funds on the workforce training, but they'd rather try to get that training offset through the workforce system or others. But so we see an interesting mix here. The first bar there, 33%, saying the federal adult ed funds will pay all the training costs. And that's what we're doing here in Texas. In Texas, we have what we call a deferential training model. We pay a core adult education cost per of about $670, and then on top of that, for the workforce training, an average cost of $1,800 on top. So that shows, you know, our state's commitment to really want to grow this and move it forward. Other states have other priorities, and so that you'll see 51% are using just a portion of that adult ed funds to pay for the workforce training, and then probably leveraging either workforce system funds or Pell Grants or self-pay to fill that gap on tuition. And then 22% saying federal adult ed funds will pay costs that other entities will not pay. And so here they're using the adult ed funds as really a measure to kind of fill the gap. So say the student gets federal financial aid, but it doesn't start till the next semester. Well, the adult ed funds may pay the first semester of tuition to get the student up and running until their Pell Grant kicks in. So good variation there. This is one I really enjoy looking at just to see how this is rolling out in the first year. Next slide. Okay, in order to leverage workforce training funds from Title I, the workforce system, providers must submit their IET program of study to the local eligible training provider list, or the ETPL. So this is a mechanism by which the Title I system can kind of activate and get funds available to eligible customers to pay for training. A student goes in, they're a dislocated worker, they go into a workforce center, become eligible, and then become eligible if so eligible for Title I workforce training system. The student can pick any kind of training course of study off of what is called the eligible training provider list, or the ETPL. So here we say how many, we're asking how many of the IETs in adult education programs are also on this ETPL list. And here, very, very nice to see 31%. So that shows not only good engagement with the workforce system, but a lot of folks are saying, yes, let's let the workforce system carry the cost of workforce training partially or wholly through the ETPL list. So 31% I thought was really good. But there you go, capacity building. Most respondents, 42%, do not know. So that tells me still big gaps out there in terms of connectivity with the workforce systems. So big growth area and lots of potential there. But that is definitely one, I think, when right now we're in the process of local MOUs being developed and those types of things with the workforce system under WIOA. That's where these discussions are going to be happening about co-enrolling students and leveraging funds and things like that. So I bet you in a year from now or 6 months from now, we're going to see that 42% really close down to a smaller percentage. Next slide, please. All right, support services. So here the respondents are asked to check what additional services, if any, are provided to students by either the adult education program or partners. So here the maroonish numbers are the adult education system providing the service, and then the purple bars on the bottom section of each graph are the partner providing. And so here across we have career navigation, that kind of hand-holder guide on the side, student advising, case management position. We see lots of that happening in the adult ed system at 91%. So that really shows that adult ed programs are understanding, this navigation component is critical, and we see that in the research. We see that really in best practices all over the place. Digital literacy, very strong component being provided as a workforce preparation activity in the IET at 94%. Much smaller percentage for child care, with partners picking that up at 48%. So that's a really strong number to see. The job placement, again, looking very strong from other partners, many times probably the workforce system. Transportation and gas cards and things like that coming out stronger for the partners. Job placement, again, assistance over there in job development at 72%. And then housing assistance, really strong to see that coming from the adult ed provider network. So that one was really surprising to me, at 70% from adult education. So again, really rich information that we're gathering here to really kind of get a good glimpse of what is, we talk about these programs as being, we're moving, not only from the world of just reading, writing, math, ESL, but now into workforce training, but also this whole supportive service component, which, for over a decade now we've recognized since, initiatives like Breaking Through and things like that, that you really need this wraparound component for student success. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you.
And the connection of IET to IELCE is that IET is a requirement in IELCE programs. These are the former EL Civics programs and the former law. So with this new program that's now codified, IET is now a requirement in IELCE, and obviously whether it's funded through AFLA funding or other funding sources that are outside of Title II, there is some flexibility in how that's being implemented. But the other purpose is really for us to help states to understand, the regulatory and sort of the statutory connections to both career pathways, in-demand occupations, partnerships, and the relevance of using data and applying data to design, programs that are both based on, I think, the needs and the demands of, I think, industry and states and local areas, but that it's also really essentially building the generation of innovative programming. And part of it is also, helping the field recognize that, while these are statutory requirements, this is really essentially also part of good program design, and there is some flexibility in how they can be conceptualized and implemented and the partnerships that, one can bring to the table. And I think another purpose is, we're here to help state directors, and state leadership in really building and identifying, their local providers who will be part of a national IELCE network. And Octave, I think, envisions more of like a network structure so that it's more, peer-to-peer learning from each other on each other's very specific, dilemmas and experiences that sort of bubble up as themes that we're seeing, and then, coupled with a lot of topical technical assistance on very specific issues, probably from subject matter experts. And then lastly, as part of this project, there will be a process in which we're identifying promising practices. We're calling this kind of the documentation phase, but essentially, we envision that, across all states, there will be, a very diverse mix of program structures and types and approaches, and, we're going to be developing, ways,
criteria rubric to really hone in on, the types of programs, case studies, but also approaches to document for the field for user relevance down the road. So where are we now? Next slide, please. Okay, great. So really, we're in the first year, and really when we got this project started, the big challenge was, that the regs had just released, and there was a lot of question, and there wasn't really any opportunity to kind of get everybody together and to move into this project as it is. And so really the goal has been to ensure that there's a good baseline of understanding, and that states feel that they had enough support kind of moving into essentially where they are now, which is in meeting the July deadline of awarding their IELCE RFPs to get their local providers lined up, and just also making sure that that's obviously in compliance with AFLA requirements. And so the way we did this was, ITA made their annual state directors meeting into like a regulations boot camp. We did a series of presentations, and also sort of just to kind of set the framework and to help make the connections between regulatory language and preamble language and the statute, and then we had several breakout sessions during the state directors meeting, and then the consortium held an NTI, which was in Chicago earlier this fall. We were part of the presentation on IET and also IELCE, working with Chris Coro and Heidi. And so we, designed materials for that, and, we'll continue to do that this year after the awards are made and we have a better sense of the actual needs. And that's pretty much kind of what's on the horizon is, helping states kind of identify their local provider, really supporting them, and really just pushing and building them towards this bigger network. And then at the same time, doing our own environmental scan of what's out there in terms of the resources that are already existing, so we're able to use things that are off the shelf, but also, building things that are useful and unique, and then using that for technical assistance. And that's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. And now we're joined by Sarah Hastings from our Department of Labor Partners, Title I Youth team.
Great. Yes, thank you. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate the chance to share just a little bit of information with folks today. As Judy said, I'm Sarah Hastings. I'm in the Division of Youth Services. I am at the Department of Labor's Employment and Training Administration, and our team oversees the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act Youth Program, but I also help manage our interagency working group on career pathways. So IET is definitely in my world, and it's exciting to be having these conversations. Great information so far. So I'm going to focus my remarks actually on our WIOA Title I Youth Program specifically, since often IET is discussed more around the adult population, and IET is definitely a piece of Title I throughout, but Title I youth program as well. So IET is really, I think folks know, it's throughout the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, both in the law and in the regulations. And as you're probably aware, it's really clearly found in Title II, where IET is defined and used throughout this title, but it's also included in Title I. And if you look up the definition of IET in Title I, it points you back to the definition found in Title II. But it really is every bit as important in Title I, and often, as you heard earlier, the combination of services and supports and funding to pay for an effective IET model is really, you can see it in both sections of the law, in all sections really of the law. So, so as I said, I work on the WIO youth program, and so I'll give some specific examples of where it's found within that program. And so just quickly, the WIOA youth program serves 14 to 21-year-old in-school youth and 16 to 24-year-old out-of-school youth. And there really is a strong emphasis on serving out-of-school youth as well as providing work experiences for youth. And so you can see here, the program has 14 elements. You know, what does that really mean? So you can go to the next slide, please. So in the final rule, you can see at section 681.630, the program element number 5 really states that it reflects an integrated education and training model and describes how workforce preparation activities, basic academic skills, and hands-on occupational skills training are to be taught within the same time frame and connected to training in a specific occupation, occupational cluster, or career pathway. So very clearly you can see, as I pointed in my last slide, this program element that sounds different, has some of the same words, really is the IET model, and this is really what we're trying to get at here. You could also say that it's what it's getting at here is what we mean when we talk about critical elements of a career pathway, right? A lot of these words sound like we're getting at a career pathway. So you can go to the next slide here. So career pathways is another term that we, use now often to really talk about what I like to say career pathways is really just very good workforce development. This is what good workforce development should look like. And there have been a number of definitions of career pathways over the years. Some similar, some different in key ways, but when WIOA was passed in 2014, it provided this definition that we all now can use to more clearly understand what it is and provides direction on many key elements to developing career pathways. And so here you can see this is the definition of career pathways found in WIOA, and as you read through it, you will come to this letter D, which again should look familiar, includes as appropriate education offered concurrently with and in the same context as workforce preparation activities and training for a specific occupational or occupational cluster. So that should look familiar. Again, so IET is clearly a key piece of the WIO youth program. It's a key piece of what we found here and what is needed to build a career pathway. And I think it's important to note, though, that as it's defined in WIOA, IET by itself is not a career pathway. It is one of many critical ingredients, and we know that ensuring an alignment with the skills needs of industries and the economy of the state and region is needed. We don't want to train folks on skills that are not needed. Career pathway programming that includes strong IET components also need to be organized in a way that meets the particular needs of the individual, and it includes counseling to support the achievement of career goals. It helps them attain diplomas or credentials, and it helps them enter and advance within a specific occupation. So IET is critical, and it fits, though, within this sort of broader context of career pathways, and but it is key, but it cannot really be done alone without all of these other things supporting and key pieces. Really, again, I think career pathways is sort of the a strong, good workforce development system in a community. So I just wanted to make a few points and just kind of connect people back to the legislation. We often talk about IET related to Title II, and I wanted to share a little bit and of course point people to the WIO Youth Program and where it fits. So we will be providing more guidance on these program elements and really helping the youth system connect with the Title II providers, Title I adult as well, and really help build those systems to develop the strong IET programs. So I'll turn it back to Judy. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. That is great to hear. Great information. And now we'll turn to Andy Nash from World Education to tell us about what they've been doing over there.
Thanks, Judy. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Andy Nash from World Education, where I'm a professional developer and the director of the New England Literacy Resource Center. From this one slide, I'm going to describe a series of IET-focused webinars that originated from conversations that project staff here at World Ed had about the most pressing questions about IET that we were hearing from the field. We saw that programs already had access to strong guidance about WIOA regulations and definitions, and what seemed to be needed were resources with a more programmatic focus, how programs were figuring out IET services that would work in their own context. So we arrived at the 3 webinar topics you see here: IET in rural settings, IET within ESL programs, and contextualized variations of IBEST. And we were fortunate to find programs from 9 different states that were either doing innovative and or time-tested IET work with strong outcomes. The career sectors they addressed range from culinary arts and building maintenance to entrepreneurship and healthcare. And we just yesterday completed the series, and the webinars, along with written answers to all the chat box questions, are archived at collegetransition.org, which is the website of the National College Transition Network. And now we're turning our attention to what else would be useful to the field, and we look forward to collaborating with or complementing the work of other organizations.
Great. Great. Thank you so much. collegetransition.org. I don't think I made that on the slide here, but that's a great resource. Okay, and now moving to Carol, who's going to tell us about some work happening at Penn State.
Yeah. Hi, Judy. Thanks. Thanks for giving us this opportunity to talk about a new guide that we are developing for basic skills curriculum for an IET. And
that was quick.
I told you.
No.
I think we need to mute everybody's lines. If you can hear us, please make sure you're muted so we only hear Carol.
Is it going well?
Okay, I'll try to talk over that. So our guide was developed for the Pathways to Employment Initiative, which is a regional partnership of Central PA Workforce Development Corporation and the North Central Workforce Development Board and the Southern Alleghenies Workforce Development Board. And it was funded by the U.S. Department of Labor through the Sectoral Partnership National Dislocated Worker Grant Program and supported by PA Department of Labor and Industry. My colleagues Blair Wilson-Toso, Kaylin Hamilton, and Tabitha Stickle developed this guide so that we could really help the basic skills Title II providers do their part of the IET. So it doesn't really focus on developing the occupational part. It addresses it and it has tools that enable people to work with the occupational skills folks or the workforce training side of the IET. It does address the workforce preparation activities, but it's really aimed at the basic skills part of the work. It begins with a brief introduction and also talks a little bit about contextualized learning and then gives some examples of some of the most well-known IETs like IBEST, Plugged in Virginia, Accelerating Opportunities, etc. Next slide, please. So one thing that we really emphasized, and this is also emphasized in the WIOA resources that have been developed, is this getting started on the occupational skills training and really thinking hard about whether or not it's appropriate for the target population. And the guide has a lot of questions that will enable basic skills folks to work with the occupational skills training folks and the workforce boards to really, before they begin developing anything, to know that the which is pretty rigorous in terms of the different kinds of activities that you have to do in terms the workforce preparation, the occupational skills, and the basic skills training. So next slide, please. We're now in the process of adding some things that will really help it be more WIOA appropriate. And so this is a foundation skills framework that we developed at ISIL and have worked with the Pennsylvania Department of Education on. So there's a lot of tools that relate to the workforce preparation activities as well. Next slide, please. We also have the tools, well, they'll have examples of what goes in the different parts of a form or a tool like this. We also have them so that they have nothing in them, and then people who are using them can adapt them and use them for their own context. All of the tools are at the end of the guide as well as within the guide, and they'll all be in Word files so that people can adapt them and make them their own. Last slide, please. I had said that the guide was really focused on the basic skills portion of the IET, but we've also included some tools that will help people work together to complete and plan the entire IET. So this is an example of bringing it all together with the occupational skills part of it. And there's 9 different tools in the guide and 4 or 5 different resources. We also have a list of other resources that pertain to IETs. We're almost finished tweaking it. It is going to be available on the Institute for the Study of Adult Literacy's website at Penn State, probably in about 2 more weeks, I hope.
Okay, that's great. What a tremendous resource. Thank you for sharing that. All right, I am going to channel Amanda, who was not able to join us for this re-recording, and talk to you about a couple of products that she's been busy working on. So in our presentation today, we've heard a lot about how you can implement IET programs, and now this is really about how you can advocate for state policies that support IET programs. So National Skills Coalition is a nonprofit coalition of adult educators, workforce development, immigrant integration advocates, and they've recently released 2 publications that can be useful in the IET conversation. Both publications focus on state IET policies that go beyond what is required by the federal government under WIOA. And the first is a 50-state scan that provides a snapshot of the current state IET policies in each state and in the District of Columbia. The scan goes state by state. I'm going to get to that chart here, and includes a short description of the policy in each state that has one. It also includes links to specific policies or related materials, such as authorizing legislation or a request for proposals that the states used. And the second publication is a policy toolkit. The toolkit describes the key components of a strong state IET policy, provides examples of a few states with especially strong policies, and then in addition, at the end of the guide, there is a model legislation that you can copy and paste and take with you to create legislation or an administrative policy in your state. I'm going to quickly get to the end here so you can see that legislative template, which is very interesting. So National Skills Coalition has made these tools freely available to adult educators as part of their broader skills equity policy scan and toolkit project. National Skills is available for phone consultations to discuss how advocates can use these tools to advance good policies in their states, and you can contact Amanda at the email listed here at the bottom of the slide. So thank you, everyone, for your interest in viewing this presentation. Please reach out to me, Judy, at CLASP, or any of the presenters who shared with us today. We're all going to look for ways to keep this important conversation going.